your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And this week we have a really cool topic for you. I know when we first started discussing, Matt, we weren't really sure about this one. Our topic is remakes that don't suck. And we were starting to wonder, are there going to be any?
Yeah,
And sure enough, there's some great ones out there. So this may be something we revisit down the road.
I agree. I think we're gonna have to revisit this multiple times and maybe make a series out of it.
Yeah, it's
It was tough for me to make a pick.
yeah, and I already have in my head a half dozen more I'd like to go over, but the horror industry is sometimes lacking for fresh ideas. So we are gluttonized with unnecessary sequels of typically diminishing quality, remakes, reboots, and a lot of trash out there that is just meant for a money grab.
Yeah, you could say that about most of Hollywood, though. So,
Yeah, true,
yeah,
true. But these are there are some gems, and
yeah.
tonight we're going to talk about two movies that I absolutely love. And I know I say that a lot, but obviously I'm a fan of the of this
Yeah.
genre. And so first, we're going to talk about "Let Me In," a 2010 film directed by Matt Reeves, who went on to greater heights for some people when he did the Batman this year.
Mm.
That is a remake of a 2008 Swedish film called "Let the Right One In." Both films are excellent, but as far as remake goes, this is one of the rare ones that I think lives up to the original.
Yeah, I agree. This is one of the most unique vampire movies I've ever seen. Um, the movie uses a vampire as a classic monster, but it takes a very fresh stance on the entire vampire trope. There's no overtly sexual themes. There's like no seduction. There's no fangs. There's no like pregnancy thing going on. All of that's eliminated, and
Mm-hmm.
we see the story really through the little boy's eyes. He's bullied in school. He's ignored by his parents, and you start to get a sense that like maybe all the other characters are the monsters,
Mm-hmm.
and it just has a very interesting take. I won't go through a whole summary right now. We're going through the movie, but
We talk about things like this a lot. You and I are big fans of images, and even though we're
mhm.
watching horrific movies at times, we love to find the beauty and the artistic merit within the film. And I think this film opens beautifully. It's a sky shot of a dark, snowbound forest with a winding road through it, and all you can see in the midst of the dark and the trees and the snow is the lights of the emergency vehicles that are winding through this forest. It's
Yeah,
beautifully done. You have no idea anything of the story at this point. You're just drawn in by this spectacular opening shot. It hooked me, anyways.
I was gonna say it captivated me immediately. Like it's just it's and it has this like that slow organ that's just kind of like almost like has like a heartbeat tempo to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just slowly like getting louder and louder as the police and the ambulance are getting closer and closer, and you start to hear the sirens, and you're like, what is going on? It just draws you in immediately.
So we end up with a police detective approaching a man in the hospital. We assume it was the person brought in by ambulance, and we can see that he's burned, but we don't get a real good look at him. And the detective leaves him a notepad to answer questions, assuming he can't speak at this point. And then the detective gets called away. There's a phone call about this individual's daughter, and while he's taking the phone call, all you hear is a nurse scream. He runs back into the room and he finds the notepad saying, "I'm sorry, Abby."
Mhm.
And you see the man 10 floors down in the snow, um, dead.
Splattered. Yeah.
And we still know almost nothing. But
Mhm.
you're again, I'm hooked in, and what the heck's going on here? And we jump back 2 weeks at this point,
Mhm.
and we see the young boy, probably the main character. He's in an apartment courtyard. He's eating candy. His name's Owen, and we go inside and see exactly what you're talking about. That he's a victim of divorce, and he's a victim now of neglect with an alcoholic mother. The home is in disarray, and you immediately feel for this kid. He's scrawny. He's almost like the prototypical nerdy
Yeah.
kid, and you can see how he just doesn't have any support
Yeah.
anywhere to help him through his development in life.
Yeah. They create this sense of isolation.
Which I think is key. In your opening, you said there's no seduction, but I could actually argue there might not be a sexual seduction, but the void in this boy's life opens him up to seductions that do take place. And
That's true. That's 100% true. I meant more of sexual seduction, but I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
there becomes a codependency that is built slowly through this film. Um, Owen has problems. We see him through his house having knife fantasies. He's walking around stick in the air,
Yeah.
and you just get the vibe that he's going through some real tough stuff.
He's got some, almost seems like he's got these like psychopathic voyeuristic tendencies. He's looking out the window towards the neighbors. He's kind of walking around his room with his shirt off with a knife, and you're like, oh, this is the next Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. He's peeping. And during his telescope peep out of his window is when he first sees a man and his daughter dragging a case, a crate, a box through the snow, and he notices the young girl is barefoot. It just, again, not a lot of explanation, just odd and curiosity.
Middle of the winter, barefoot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Walking through snow. Now, this takes place in Los Alamos, New Mexico, in March of '83, is what the heading tells us. Now, I always thought of New Mexico as a dry, arid desert community. This movie has snow nonstop the entire length of the film, which, again, I don't know the weather there, but it kind of threw me.
But that pays homage to the original, which was in Sweden.
So, yeah. They could have picked anywhere USA, but I actually thought about looking at the weather in that town during March of 1983 just to see how accurate it was. But the next day at school, we see what we expect. Owen is bullied. He's the bullies in the locker room give him a massive wedgie. He's screaming, he's crying, he's on the floor, he pisses himself. And we see what his life is like at school, and we just one more thing dumping on this poor kid that you very quickly, even though he's odd, and even though he may have some tendencies that are off, you kind of understand where he's coming from, and you feel for the kid. He on his way home, he buys his favorite candy that he's always eaten now and later's, and he sees a little knife in the store display, and it cuts to him back in the apartment courtyard, and he's kind of knifing at a tree, like he's taking his frustrations out on a tree with this little knife.
Yeah.
And the girl suddenly appears behind him, very suddenly. They talk a little bit, and small talk, and she tells him, "We can't be friends," and leaves. And more curious for him, more disappointment, more things in his life that aren't working out.
Yeah, it's kind of like this little homage to Romeo and Juliet, and they kind of do that later with the book. They kind of throw that in there. It's like two young people that can't be together, and for completely different reasons, though.
Yeah, that is so true. It cuts then to, we see the girl's dad breaking into a car, and he hides in the back seat with a black bag, like a garbage bag mask that he's self-created. And we see him kill the driver. We see him hang him up and drain his blood into a jug. As he's leaving with his prize, he slips on the ice and spills most of the jug of blood.
Yeah.
And we know this is a vampire movie, so if you went in knowing nothing, you'd start to be figuring out things here. But the next thing we hear is we see Owen, and we can hear him hearing the father and daughter arguing through the wall, and he's listening. He's not above eavesdropping. He's not above peeping. We know this.
Right.
the next night, he's in the courtyard playing with a Rubik's Cube, and the girl approaches. She's barefoot again and tells him that she really doesn't get cold. We hear her stomach gurgling the whole time, which is an interesting effect. And she likes puzzles. He gives her the Rubik's Cube, lets her borrow it, and she takes it.
Which is interesting. That's a really it's very metaphorical in the movie, because what we start to find out when we watch the movie is that they're like two pieces of a puzzle together.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so they're again, like,
Good point.
first we had the Romeo and Juliet book, and then they're playing with the Rubik's Cube together. And it's interesting that it's all done in the backdrop of a frozen playground.
Yes. Yeah. Good point.
Like very relative to their childhood trauma that they're going through. So it's a very symbolic movie. It does it very well.
Yes, it does. The next scene, we cut to a young girl who we think is Abby, but she's crouched over in a tunnel off the main road, and we hear her. She's crying, and she's asking for help. She's faking being hurt, and a man comes to rescue her. She asks him to pick her up. So while she's cradled in his arms, she is now with her face right towards his neck. And this is where we get our first glimpse of Abby as a vampire, because she attacks him. And it's a really cool, herky jerky, super fast with odd stops. It's very animalistic and unnatural.
She slams his head up right up against the wall, and you can see his go dunk, and it's just like, oh, he's done.
And there is a super, again, I find beauty in odd places. There's a super shot of her looking up from the kill, and her eyes have gone completely pale, and her mouth is covered in blood, and it's creepy, but it's also beautiful.
It's
really
done.
well done.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I wonder if she could sense, because they almost get this, like, was that guy like a pedophile, and she could just tell? Like, why did he like run over there? It's like, hey, little girl, like, come here, let me pick you up. And you know what I mean? Like, it was really weird.
It's possible. I didn't get that vibe. He seemed, she asked to be carried, and he seemed like a genuine, helpful soul. But we know from the father spilling the jug that she needed blood.
Yeah. And so she was luring an adult man in.
Yeah.
Like, she knew what she was doing. She didn't go,
for sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like, she kind of just knew, hey, if I just sit here and play, she's been around for a while.
Yep. We cut back to we see Owen, and he can hear him arguing again. And now we know the subject of the argument is how she had to go out and get blood because of his failures from before. And we start to kind of clue in from their conversations that despite appearances, these probably aren't father and daughter.
Mm-hmm.
We see the father leave. He now has to go dispose of the body. So he's the cleanup man. He's the get me blood and clean up my mess man. And
he's the roadie. Yeah.
Yeah. Next day, Owen's at school. He gets picked on again. He gets a whip mark across his face. That night, he's back in the courtyard, and Abby comes out, and he shows her Morse code, and he says, "We can communicate this through the wall," which Abby gets really upset, figuring out that he can hear through the wall because she knows what's been going on and been discussed.
He gets that look on his face, like, she's like, "Can you hear me?" And it's a good save because he just admits it. He's like, "Sometimes."
Yeah, exactly. She tells him he has to stand up to bullies and that she can help him. And in typical misogynistic early 80s response, he says, "But you're a girl." Little do we know.
Yeah.
They go to the arcade together, and they start hanging out like normal kids. And you start to see them having a banner, and she's watching him play video games. And it's kind of cool. Like, it's a moment of normalcy particularly for Owen, who doesn't have any seemingly normal aspect of his life.
Right. Or comforting relationships to that extent. Yeah.
I thought this part was really cool. He buys his now and laters that he loves, and he wants her to try it, and she can't eat anything but blood. he doesn't know this, but so
Right.
when she declines, he's very disappointed, and she can see the sadness in his face, and says, "Okay, she'll try it." And it immediately cuts to her outside getting sick.
Yeah.
She can't have now and later's. No
Right.
matter how
And I
much he
thought,
sings the song, she can't have it.
yeah, she went and threw him up, and I was like, I do that when I have those too.
Yeah.
Have a starburst. Like, what is this? Oh yeah, it's the '80s. Never mind. So
He
that's about all they had.
he runs out and he hugs her from behind, and it's kind of a nice moment. And he says,
Yeah.
she asks if he likes her, and he says he does like her. And she says, well, would you like me if I was not a girl? And they kind of leave that hanging because he's confused.
Mhm.
Um, Next scene, the father goes out for another kill. And this is something I really liked about this. He's very much not the typical serial killer. When we see somebody in a mask getting in the backseat of cars to kill people, it is, they're not human, right? They're uh, this masked monster who just run through people. He's very human. He's nervous. He's
Yeah.
unsure.
Yeah.
Uh,
He's a
and
little oafish when he falls down in that first scene. You know, he doesn't seem like this like sadistic person.
Yeah, well, and he's doing it not for the sadistic reason. He's doing it to
Yeah.
supply for someone he cares about, and that struck me as so real, so much different than just a mass killer
Yeah.
on a rampage.
And he has this constant look of like regret and doubt in his eyes. Like whenever there's a scene with him, like
Mm-hmm.
you can just see it's just like years of pain. You know.
And it's Richard Jenkins,
Yeah.
the father from Step Brothers,
Yeah.
and it's hard to picture him as anything but Doback. Uh, but he really does an excellent job.
But he has that same look of like, I can't believe this is my life.
Yeah, he looks like when they just crashed the boat. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so on this particular trip, everything goes wrong. Um, the driver he's behind picks up a passenger. Now there's two people in the car instead of the one. They stop at a gas station, and this is a really tense moment.
Yeah.
And as a viewer, you're unsure of who to root for here. This guy's a killer, but you understand his situation. You're kind of, you kind of feel
Yep.
for him a little bit. They pull into a gas station and park under a bright light, and he ends up getting discovered. The driver gets out to go in and pay for gas. He gets discovered by the passenger.
Sees the shoe or something like that, right?
Yeah, he's getting something out of the back seat and sees his shoe, and then looks, and there's his mask.
Mhm.
And they struggle, and the father finally chokes out the passenger. But by now, the driver's coming back, and he met a couple friends, and there's all these people charging the car. He gets in the driver's seat and backs out like a bat out of hell. And I know you'll appreciate this, because the camera sits in the back of the car
Yeah.
and stays there. We see him peeling away. We can see the people chasing him through the front window.
Yep.
And we see him lose control. We see him go down a ditch, and we see the car flip, and the camera never leaves the inside of the car.
Yeah,
So
I
you
love
see
it.
the bodies tossing around, and you're going, how the heck did they do that? But it was a brilliant shot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was fantastic. It was just a testament to Matt Reeves, in my opinion. I think he's a fantastic director.
Yeah, it was great. So instead of, he's trapped now, and people are coming, and instead of being caught, he decides to take out of his supply bag the bottle of acid, and he pours it all over his face and head. And we see the back of his head sizzling. We see the hair melting and the skin bubbling. It's they don't show the face, but it's brutal, and it's grotesque, and it's really kind of a cool scene.
And that kind of brings us up to speed, because in the beginning of the movie, that's who's in the ambulance, and they say he's got 90% burns all over his body, and it's possibly that it's done by acid.
Yeah.
And so we get to the scene, and now we're kind of caught up. And
Yes.
which I didn't actually understand. Why did he do that though? Why did he? Maybe I missed something. Why did he burn himself?
I speculated it's so he couldn't be identified, so he
Mhm.
couldn't bring anything back to Abby.
Okay.
That was my guess.
To protect her. That makes sense.
To protect her, as he's done for apparently a long time.
Mm.
But now, now we're up to speed, and now the scenes we see are intercut with what we saw before. Um, Abby hears the news on the radio, and goes to the hospital barefoot, which is we see her going in to talk to the nurse, and then we see the detective come out to talk to the nurse, which we already saw before. While he's out there, we now see Abby standing outside the window of the 10th floor of the 10th story hospital, and she's knocking, and we see Richard Jenkins' character come to the window, and his face is just melted, and
Yeah.
it's
Looks
like
like
a
a
cross
zombie.
between Freddy Krueger and the Incredible Melting Man, if from the 70s.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's hideous. He's
Yeah.
Abby asked to come in, which becomes a recurring theme and where the title comes from. That she
Hmm.
can't enter unless he gives her permission. He does not give her permission, but says he sticks his neck out and allows her to drink from him. She does, and as she drains his body, we see him completely go, and then he tumbles the 10 stories down into the snow where we saw him at the beginning. It's kind of cool how they interlaced all that and gave us a part of the story and then filled in the gaps. And
Yeah.
I really liked how they did it.
Yeah. It was good storytelling.
Uh, Next thing we know, Abby shows up at Owen's window. And he's on the second floor, and he's a little perplexed because he still doesn't understand quite what she is. She asks if she can come in, but he cannot look at her. So
Mhm.
he says okay. Uh, she comes in, she takes all of her stuff off, and she gets into bed with him. He's facing the camera, she's behind him, so he can't see her. But he remarks how cold she is, and they're just kind of laying there, and it's another tender moment between these two and the difficult lot in life that they both have.
Mhm.
And he asks her to be his girlfriend, and she says that she is not a girl, that she is nothing. um, and he gets a little upset, of course, and then she asks, well, what does it mean to go steady? And he basically says, well, like nothing's different. And then
Right.
so she finally agrees to go steady with him, which I also thought was an awkward 12-year-old
You're right. Right.
moment, that rang true of these characters.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
It's done well. It's done well in that innocent, tender, young 12-year-olds kind of just trying to comfort each other and be there
Yes,
for each other. Yeah.
they're
Like trying to
in
be.
bed together, and she had taken, I think she had taken all of her clothes off, but it's
Yeah.
it's
But
not that at all.
right. She also has blood on her mouth, and she's like, "Don't, you can't look at me," because she doesn't
Yes,
want to see all the blood. Right. Right.
yes, it's not. It's just not that at all. It's just a tender, touching moment. There's nothing sexual about it in any
It's
way.
almost like two abused children just be like, just lie here with me. They've both been abused by their parents, and like we just want to lie together and
Yeah,
sleep. Yeah.
yeah. No, it was nice. I thought it was a nice scene. Um, Next morning we go to school, and school is taking a trip to a frozen pond to play hockey and ice skate. I cannot imagine in 2022 the liability would ever allow such a thing to happen. It's and at one point the teacher even tells him to be careful for the thin parts on the ice. Like,
Yeah.
this just would never happen.
It would never happen. Yeah.
No, but it does happen in this movie. And the bullies confront Owen, and he had picked up a metal pole, and he smashes the main bully across the head with it, splits the kid's ear.
Hmm.
Um, and at the exact same time, all this is happening, the other kids who were skating discover a body
Yeah. Everyone
frozen in
starts
the ice.
screaming. Yeah.
So
Everyone
they're
starts
screaming
screaming.
for this and then screaming
Yeah.
for that,
Yeah.
and it's just chaos. And we know this to be the body that the father had previously disposed of.
Hmm.
So Owen gets in a little bit of trouble, but he doesn't get expelled or anything. And on his way out, he sees his bully getting bullied in the exact same manner by the bully's older brother. So it's the cliche of I'm going to take it out on somebody else because it's taken out on me,
Hmm.
which gives a little depth to the bully character. Not a
Right.
lot, but
Yeah.
gives you a little behind the scenes
But
on him.
but it just kind of shows you like within the community that there's just like layers going on. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just like a one-dimensional bully. Like it's like, well, this kid's traumatized too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I was in the 80 in 83. I was like 1 year older than these kids are. So I was exactly in that spot in that
Yeah.
era.
Yeah.
Um, then next they show Owen in the courtyard and Abby's there and he tells her that he stood up for himself and she kisses him on the cheek and he says he wants to show her something. And he takes her to somewhere in the apartment complex. There's a secret room it's not a full apartment, but it's a little area. And the prior maintenance supervisor had showed Owen this area. So it's kind of like a private little secret area. Um, and as they're, sharing time together, Owen decides he's going to make a blood pact with her and he cuts his hand.
Very 80s thing to do too, by the way.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It reminded me of The Hangover, on the roof where it's just like, it's never a good idea.
Yeah.
No one you're with is going to respond positively.
I was one wolf and now we're back to wolves.
Yeah. So he wants to be two wolves. And of course, as the blood drips down, you see her overcome with her hunger and her nature. She drops down to all fours and starts licking the blood off this filthy concrete floor. And she tells him to leave, but he doesn't. He just stands there dumbfounded. So finally she takes off.
I would have done that too.
Yeah, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
She runs out in the courtyard and there happens to be a couple coming home and she attacks the woman
immediately,
bites her neck, ravages her, and then sprints off again with her animalistic movements, jumps over a fence and is gone. Owen now is distraught, beside himself, doesn't know what he saw, doesn't know what to do, and he goes to his mom. And she is passed out and completely of no help to him as she's been the entire film.
Yep.
He calls his dad, which is a new piece for us, and you get the vibe they have not talked very much. And his dad's with another woman, the typical story, and his dad blows him off. And he's like, "Hey, we'll hang out soon, bud. And sorry it's been like this," but doesn't offer him any help.
Yeah.
And
he's looking to him for emotional support, and the dad's just like, we'll hang out soon. I'm sorry. And like the kid's just, I know Owen's just like got teardrops down his eyes. Like my mom's not here for me. My dad's not here for me. Like you just get this.
I get bullied at school.
You get bullied at school.
I got nothing.
Nothing. There's just this dire sense of isolation in this kid's life. And they do a great job of portraying it.
So despite what he saw, he goes back to Abby's. Yeah, he knocks on the door and she lets him in, and he asks if she's a vampire. He's seen movies, he knows. And she says that she needs blood to live. And he says, "Well, okay, how old are you?" She says, "I'm 12, but I've been 12 for a very long time." It just reinforces the vampire lore. And there's a cool shot when he sees that the man, she tells him that the man wasn't her dad, but it was her friend. And he sees a picture of them together, and the man was a young kid, similar age to Abby. So now we get the impression they've been together 40 or 50 years with this man helping Abby.
Yep.
So in that one, little shot, it just builds a background.
Yeah, it gives them and it almost makes you start to look back at all the scenes with them, and it's almost like they were just this old married couple that had like nothing left to say to each other. Like he's just kind of at his wit's end. And
he leaves, and she tells him on the way out, I told you that we couldn't be friends. And then it cuts to the hospital. We find out that the woman that was attacked in the courtyard is still alive, but she's not in good shape. And our detective comes in and he wants to talk to the husband or boyfriend. And they kind of walk outside of the room. And again, in another terrific scene, behind them, we can see all this, but they can't. Behind them, the woman comes to, and we see her eyes are pale. And then we see her take her IV bandage off, and she starts dining on her own elbow, arm crook
Mhm.
blood,
Yeah.
and it's really well done.
Yeah.
It's really so unique. I've not seen anything quite like it. And the way
Yeah.
the shot was framed, we see everything, and we hear the two talking, and know they see nothing. Um,
Right.
which I just thought was like, how do you pull this off where nobody's freaking out? Well, then a nurse happens to walk in the room, and she also doesn't notice. It just looks like she's kind of hunched over. The nurse opens the curtains, and all hell breaks loose. The woman
Yeah.
catches fire slowly and then is quickly engulfed.
Yep. Just a burst in flames. Yeah.
The whole room is engulfed. The nurse gets engulfed. She's done. The whole thing is just an absolute mess. And then the two people who were oblivious to everything going on behind them are certainly now aware. And it cuts from that scene. But I was left like, holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great scene. Like you said, the way they filmed it, where they kind of like where they have it, the camera angle shows her facing, like she's like what she's doing, and then you see them behind, they can't see anything.
Yeah,
It's just, yeah, it was a great shot.
that was cool. Um, Next, Abby shows up at Owen's door, and this is where she tells him that he must invite her in. And he says, "Well, what if I don't?" And you just come in, and she does. And we see, and this is like the cover of a lot of the DVDs and Blu-rays that were out there. She
Mhm.
just starts oozing blood out of everywhere. He quickly grabs her and hugs her and says to come in, because despite everything, despite what she may be, she's really his only friend in the world.
Yeah, it's weirdly another tender moment, because that's she's willing to do that to herself painfully just to show him, so she can like be honest with him, be like, hey, this is what happens. And like it's like they have these weird tender moments together,
Mm-hmm.
like where they're basically enveloped in this trauma, and they're just trying to help soothe each other by being friends.
And it ends with him hugging her, telling her
Yeah.
it's okay,
Yeah.
and um, and you can see the genuine affection on his face.
Yeah.
It's really quite cool.
Yeah.
We then see it cuts to kind of a cute but a lighter hearted moment. Abby takes a shower and cleans up, and Owen gives her one of his mom's dresses, and he's playing music, and he's very awkwardly dancing, and like two 12-year-olds on their first hangout, their first date. It's really kind of cute.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice scene. His mom comes home, and Abby flies out the window.
Right. Which is almost kind of, it's kind of funny too, right? Because normally it's like, oh, where are you gonna go? She's like, I'll just fly out the window, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shortly after, the mother's passed out on the couch. And as a child of the 80s, I really appreciated this, because as Owen is now sneaking out of the house, you watch him sneaking out in the reflection of the PSA that ran every night at 10 p.m. that said, "It's 10
Yes.
p.m. Do you know where your
Where
kids
your
are?"
children are. Yeah.
So in the reflection of that, we're watching the kid escape, which I
Yeah.
I thought was kind of
Yeah,
funny.
they put little drops of humor throughout the movie like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would be a little bleak, because a lot of what we've experienced is very depressing.
Yeah, it's childhood trauma is the theme of this movie, if you would ask me. So, yeah, a lot of it is bleak.
So Owen goes to Abby's apartment. It's just the two of them, and she has a note. She's going to be hidden in the bathroom. Don't open the doors. Just let me be. And the detective shows up. So Owen hides, and the detective breaks in. But the detective sees the wallets, the IDs from presumed missing people over the years, and he finds Abby's note to Owen about she's in the bathroom and not to come in. So the detective goes into the bathroom, and he starts in the tub. He starts pulling off thick blanket after thick blanket, and we see Abby is sleeping in the tub under the blankets. And the detective goes to the window, and he's about to pull the paper off, bringing sunlight into the room. And Owen bursts in to stop him. He can't allow that to happen. So while they're standing off at this exchange, Abby comes too, and she attacks, the detective, and Owen's turned and covering his ears, but we can hear everything. And she is doing what she does. She's going to town, munching on him, feeding. There's, slurping and gnawing and, all the sounds you would expect.
Yeah.
And she comes up behind Owen in almost complete reverse of what just happened. She's now hugging him from behind. She tells him that she has to go away, and she gives him a kiss on the mouth with her bloody lips, and he does not pull away.
Yeah.
Which, again, a lot of tender moments. He watches her get into a taxi. He's watching out the window, and he's crying. And again, we feel for the kid. There's really nothing in his life but his relationship with this girl that's worth anything.
Yeah, you're almost like worried from the beginning of the movie, like this kid's not going to turn out okay.
Yeah.
And then the only thing that's really that his only saving grace really is this girl, but she's a monster, right?
Yes.
So which is interesting because that's the thing that's comforting him. Like, it's just this really interesting dynamic. It's almost like she's looking for the innocence in him, and he's looking for like the seething revenge that he wants on the world through her. And they're just kind of like comforting each other. Two pieces of the puzzle.
In his world, the monsters are the bullies, and the monsters are the neglectful parents, and the monsters are the total shit in life that he's been dealt. And her monstrousness comes with a friendship and a tenderness and a companionship that no one else offers him. So it's a much less of a monster than what he's dealing with. Yeah. And you can see him walk himself through this rationale to get to this point.
Yeah. And the thing that you invite in your life is either going to save you or destroy you. Right. And it goes back to the original title, because this is a remake. The original title was Let the Right One In. And so that's kind of the theme of this movie, is like, who does he let in his life? Letting the right one in. Yeah. Is it these people that are monsters in his life, or is it the actual vampire monster?
Yeah.
And so, so they play that entanglement throughout the entire movie. It's interesting.
We go back to the school gym, and we're in the pool, and the bullies, including the older brother, have hatched a plan to get back at Owen for splitting the kid's ear. They start a fire out in the dumpster and lead the gym teacher out there, and then lock the doors. So they are now locked inside with Owen, who's in a pool, and it looks like they're going to try to drown him. The older brother is holding him underwater, and he's holding him there, and he says he has to stay in there 3 minutes, or just a ridiculous amount of time. And
then he's still going to cut him. He's like, if you stay there for 3 minutes, only cut you a little bit.
Yeah. And the camera's underwater with Owen. It keeps cutting to the clock, and you're feeling the tension of how long he's stuck under there. You're feeling his helplessness. And the next thing you hear is a crash, and then you see blood fly through the water.
Yeah.
And then you see a head drop down and float down past Owen. Yeah. Abby has broken through a high window of the gym.
Yeah, you can hear struggling up top. Yeah.
But they're not showing it. Very
you just
tactful use of what they show and what they don't show. But they show when it's all done, and it's just carnage. Abby has destroyed the bullies. There's body parts. There's blood in the water. It's a mess. And it kind of pulls back from the pool, and you see the carnage. And the final scene, it cuts to a train. You see Owen with a large trunk. He's by himself. They have tickets. He's going somewhere, and you hear him knock Morse code on top of the trunk as he unfolds a now and later. And you understand that they are now headed off to this life together.
And he's going to be the familiar. He's going to be the new individual that helps her for as long as he can, supposedly.
Yeah, for
So
forever,
yeah,
until he can't. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, I think this is a beautiful movie.
I agree.
I think it's equally horrific, tender. It's beautifully shot, and
Yeah.
and this always jumps out at me. Last week we reviewed a movie where we talked about how poor the acting was. The
Hmm.
child actors, Chloe Grace Moretz, Cody
Hmm.
Smith McPhee, are amazing in this movie.
I agree, and I'm kind of a stickler for that for child acting movies because they're either really good or they're just awful.
We've
Um,
seen
it,
so many lately. If you look at like Stranger Things and you look
it
at like It Part One, like these kids are amazing, and these two
yeah,
are off the charts.
yeah,
Um, Stephen King
agreed.
called this when it came out in 2010 the best American horror movie in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I could see that. It's very layered, it's very deep, and it's very contrasted too because just even the name, even when the genre, like a romance horror, like that in itself is a contrast. Like the whole movie is a contrast.
Yeah,
I mean, even from like the cinematography, how it's like really dark, but then there's lots of white snow, so it's like dark, but all this like light white, and like everything in the movie just has a contrast to it.
yeah, it's
It's
beautiful.
yeah, it's very well done. I've recommended this movie to several people already so far.
And you hadn't seen this prior to
I have not. No, I had heard of it, but I just never watched it because I originally I'd seen it and I was like, oh, it's a kids like romance movie. Like I didn't. I saw like a preview for it or something. I was like, maybe I'll check that out, and I never did. But I'm really glad I did.
well, good.
Yeah.
All right, our next movie tonight we're going to talk about is another remake. Obviously, that's our subject. Evil Dead from 2013, directed by Fede Alvarez. It was his directorial debut. The, the Evil Dead franchise is, of course, iconic and beloved by so many. Uh, and the original producers, including Bruce Campbell, were producers on this film. So they kind of made sure it was going to be guided in the right direction and not dishonor the legacy.
Yeah.
This is a different movie than the one we just reviewed. There is no tenderness,
None.
right?
None.
There
None.
is a lot of blood, a
Yeah.
lot of violence, and not a lot of tenderness. But this is a tremendous movie.
Yeah.
The opening scene kicks it right off. There's a girl running through the woods. She's bleeding, running from something. We don't know what. And all we
Mhm.
see is she gets bagged over the head and then knocked out with the butt of a shotgun.
Yep.
And it cuts to her tied to a wooden beam. And there's a bunch of odd characters surrounding her, and
Yeah.
including her father.
Yeah.
And they're pouring gas on this poor young girl. And we're like, who the hell are these crazy people? She's begging her father to let her free, but he's not letting her free. And then we get that she changes into the demon form,
Yep.
and she's telling everybody off. And we see why they got her. You know, we know the Evil Dead history. We know what she is now.
Mhm.
And they light her up, and then take the shotgun and completely explode her head. And that goes into the opening credits. But the tone is
Yeah.
set.
Yep. Boom. Evil Dead. Yeah. It
Yeah,
gets right into it.
we know what this movie is. You
Yeah.
know, the Evil Dead franchise was always, you know, they did a lot of tongue in cheek. There was a lot of humor.
Right.
Right away, you realize there's not going to be any talking moose on the wall or cuckoo clock coming out at you. It's not that
Right.
movie.
Right.
And that movie's brilliant, but this is leaning into what if we told this story with a different tone and a different perspective.
Right. What if they just made it? I mean, it's all the same. It's all the same carnage. It's all the same viciousness, but the tone is just different. Like it's just right on the nose of what it's going to be. It knows exactly what it's trying to be. Doesn't try to do any gimmicks. Doesn't try to do any tricks. It's like this is Evil Dead, like
Straight hardcore horror.
straight hardcore. Right to it. Yep. And I appreciate the fact that they did that because as
Yeah,
much as I love the originals, like I'm glad there's this alternate version that exists. You know.
yeah. It gives it a nice balance.
Yeah.
Um, we cut to our main story. Five people are meeting at a cabin. Our main character's name is Mia, and she is there to get clean from heroin.
Yeah.
And her brother David is among the people, and some other friends.
I think
Uh,
that's I love that actually that they did that, because in the original one they just went there, they just went there for fun, right?
yes,
And but this one they actually, it kind of gives them a reason as why this girl might lose her mind at first, which
yes,
would keep everyone else on doubt, which, you know, the whole withdrawing and hallucinating and being sick, and like, I'm like, all right, that's actually, it's actually a horrible idea to take your friend out to the woods in the cabin to do that. And then you're kind of like, well, that's actually the worst thing they could do. And then they introduce the friend. She's like, well, I'm a registered nurse. And it's like they immediately say that in the opening lines. And it's
yeah.
like, okay, so they obviously have their friend who's a registered nurse, and she should know better, but whatever. Well,
Well,
it still sets up a good reason for why she would be acting crazy, right?
right, right. So yeah, they discount everything she's believing. And one of the
Right.
first things she does is there's a smell, and the smell is really bothering her, but nobody else smells it.
Mhm.
And then the dog, of course, the dog comes with him. He grabs the area rug and pulls it aside, and we see the cellar door and blood all over the entranceway, right under the blood, or right under the
Mhm.
rug.
Mhm.
Uh, so she wasn't crazy to be smelling this. And why didn't everybody else smell it? Is the next question. They go down into the cellar, and there's the charred post from the opening, and for some random reason, there's about 50 dead cats hanging on chains. It's creepy. It's disgusting. I
Yeah.
don't know what purpose it served, but
Has that Texas Chainsaw Massacre feel to it? Just this, you know, dilapidated down basement that just smells and looks like death. You know.
and of course there's a book on the table, and that's bound in barbed wire. Well, one of the
Yeah.
friends, the nurse's boyfriend Eric, he takes the book upstairs. He's a teacher, so inquisitive minds.
Yeah.
And he has to cut the barbed wire off, and he has to unwrap it from a plastic bag it's in, and he starts reading through the book. And of course he gets a paper cut, and his blood drips into the book, and then he reads words he shouldn't read. And we get the classic Evil Dead presence in the woods, with the whirring sound and the high speed
Yeah.
first person camera.
Which I love, and I'm glad they kept that.
Yes, yes, I
Yeah.
am too, because that's just the presence is the presence. You see demons, but this
Yeah.
presence in the woods is always first person and never truly identifiable. It's just evil,
Right.
which I think is cool. But
Yeah.
uh, Mia's outside, and she sees the demon woman from the opening. Her presence is awoken by this
Mhm.
presence in the woods, and she goes in and tells, and she wants to leave. And of course, they say no. They think she's just trying to get out of getting clean. They think it's a ploy to escape detox. So she steals a car, and she takes off, and she's
Yeah.
driving through this forest road at what looks to be 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It's not a highway. And of course, and she's strung out a little bit. She's starting to go through some of the withdrawal.
At this point, she is the most rational of all of them. Even though she's going through this heroin withdrawal, she knows exactly what needs to be done. She's getting out of there.
Yeah, but of course they don't believe her.
Right.
Right. So the woman appears in the road, and Mia crashes the car into a pond. She wakes up in the pond, and the presence is chasing her, and it chases her until the vines grab her, and she's caught up in the possessed vines of the woods. Very much throwback to the originals,
The original. Yep.
but in somewhat of a twist. The demon woman appears and vomits thick black goo all
Yeah.
over the vines.
Yeah. This whole scene's goopier than the original.
It's goopy, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The black gets into the vines, making them worse than they already were as possessed vines.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the vines, they darken, and
Yeah.
you see them go up, her dress, and the vines penetrate her.
Yep.
Awful.
Yep.
Can't
And
imagine.
then from there, they cut to the demon screaming, mimicking her screams. Yeah.
Yeah, brutal scene.
Mhm.
And then the group is looking for her, and they find her in the woods, and she's just leaning against the tree. She looks physically and emotionally wiped. They take her back to the cabin where she insists they need to go because there's something in the woods. And she's acting a little strange. Uh, of course, the withdrawal, people don't
They
believe
just
her.
they just chalk it up to the heroin experience. Like, listen, we know, get back in the house, get in the bed, Yeah.
Yeah. Her brother David takes a bag of the dead cats out to dispose of them and finds his dog dead. And he thinks Mia had something to do with it because she was outside. So he goes in to confront her, and Mia now is in the shower, and we keep flashing to pages of prophecy from the book, and it shows the demon woman uh, burning with hot
Yeah.
water, and
Yes.
we see Mia crank the heat all the way up, and she's actually standing in the shower with the water scalding and melting her face a little bit. It's brutal.
It's graphic. Yeah.
It is graphic. It looks very realistic. Um, so David breaks down the door and finds her like this. He shuts the water off and they drag her out. And now David's like, okay, I got to get her out of here. So he throws her in his Jeep and they take off, just the two of them. David's girlfriend is still there and the other two friends. And they find out, as is always the case in an Evil Dead movie, the road is completely washed out with a fast running high river of water.
Yep.
And
The original was the bridge, and then this is like the flood.
yeah, they're not going anywhere. So they go back to the cabin, and Olivia is the nurse. She gives Mia a sedative, and says that this should knock her out. She'll sleep till morning, and we'll get out of here. As soon as she says that, Mia walks out, not sedated, and with a shotgun in her arm, and she shoots her brother right in the arm. And then she speaks as the demon. So we now know that Mia is completely possessed, and we know now she is similar to the girl at the opening. She jumps on Olivia and she's holding her down and vomits thick dark blood all over her face. It's going down her mouth. It's everywhere. It's a ridiculous amount of vomit to come out of a human being, and it's just going all over her face. And they managed to knock her off of there and knock her into the cellar and get her trapped into the cellar. So now Olivia goes into the bathroom to clean up, and she's a mess. We see her eyes flutter, the mirror breaks, and she stands there and pisses on the floor. And we now know, oh, Olivia's in trouble now too.
Yeah.
When
she looks in the mirror, she looks down for a second, but the reflection keeps looking up at her, and it turns into the demon. And then she looks up and sees the demon, and that's when the thing shatters, and she freaks out and backs off, and that's when the demon gets her.
Yeah.
And then it makes her freeze, and then like she pisses herself, and
yeah, it was again, this movie, once it gets going, and it doesn't take long to get going, it's unrelenting.
It doesn't stop. Yeah, it's unrelenting.
Eric walks in. Eric's her boyfriend, the teacher who started reading from the book, and she is cutting her face off with broken glass. Another image that was prophesized in the book. And Eric slips in the blood, and he almost cripples himself landing on the toilet.
Yeah.
And Olivia attacks him, and she has the syringe. And I know you mentioned that you hate the eyeball scenes.
Yeah.
She is going at his face with a syringe, including going right through his glasses.
You can see the glasses crack with each hit that she's doing. And I was like, oh man. Yeah. And that's not even the worst part to me. The worst part, he bashes her head in, which I was like, thank God. And then, because she deserved it for hitting him in the eye.
I know how you feel about the eye thing.
Yeah. And then they do a close up right to his eye, and he's pulling the needle out. And I'm like, oh man.
Yeah. He had when he hit the toilet, it kind of knocked it. So he's got the top, and he completely bashes her head into a pulp, and that's scene. The end of the Olivia demon. So David, he's trying to patch up Eric, and Eric's distraught. It was his girlfriend or wife. I'm not sure if they clarify, but that he just bashed to a mush. And Eric tells him that he read from the book, and he thinks he released this evil. Natalie, David's girlfriend, walks back into the main room, and the cellar door is open. And Mia is down there whimpering in her regular voice, asking for help. And Natalie goes down, and she encounters exactly what you'd expect, the demon. She tries to escape, and we see her coming out of the cellar, and then we see her pulled back in.
Yeah.
And the cellar door shuts, which was another kind of cool scene.
Yeah.
Um,
I liked all the cellar door stuff that they did, how it would kind of like creak up and they peep out. Like, I mean, just like the original. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But the way they made use of that was just, I think, to me, like cinematic brilliance.
yeah, and
Yeah.
a trapdoor cellar in the middle of the main floor.
And they're just kind of like looking up at it, like they're trapped in there, but they can kind of still taunt you. They were taunting them the whole time.
Only in a cabin in the woods could you find something like that.
Yeah.
But Natalie comes to with the Mia demon climbing up her body, getting closer to her.
Yeah.
And then
like licking her and stuff. And it's just, yeah.
And then she bites her hand, and just like a big chunk. She's just gnawing on it. And she can't get her. She finally gets her loose. And the Mia demon picks up a knife, and in another like really, really brutal scene, cuts her own tongue straight down the middle to a forked tongue.
One of my favorite scenes of the entire movie. I don't know why. I don't know. It's just messed up. Yeah. Just looking at her, like, and just cuts her own tongue in half, and it's vicious.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
David pulls Natalie out and is asking about Mia, and the demon says that Mia is not here. Your little sister is being raped in hell. Like, can you imagine?
Yeah,
It's brutal.
They're constantly taunting them, and
yeah. Eric, they come back to Eric, and he's trying to burn the book, but as we know, the book will not burn. It's just sitting in the fire, no effect on it.
Yeah.
And he tells David about the steps he would need to take to cleanse Mia's soul. And David's blowing him off. Doesn't because it's burying her alive, burning her. It's
dismemberment. Yeah,
dismemberment. And he's like, I'm not doing any of that. That's crazy. Natalie is in the kitchen trying to wash off her bite wound, and in another grotesque scene, as she squeezes and rinses it, it's oozing black. And the more she squeezes, the more black comes out. And then we see the rot start to travel up her hand and arm.
Yeah.
And in a very throwback scene, she grabs
the turkey carver.
The electric knife is plugged in, ready to go, of course.
Yeah.
And
what were they doing? Having turkey before this? Like,
not sure. My electric knife's usually put away until I need it, but this one's sitting there, plugged in, ready to go.
Ready to go.
Fortunately for Natalie, and she saws off her own arm.
Being taunted by Mia the demon. Just like, no, just taunting her, like, just the whole time, like, don't do it. Yeah, just like with these eyes of like a circus clown. Like, the whole thing's sadistic.
This movie went so far, I did find myself questioning, could you cut off your own arm with an electric knife? Could you actually do it?
It depends on what it feels like to have a possessed demon arm growing on you.
I guess.
You know what I mean? Because like it's growing on her, and then she's like, would you have a choice? Like, it's one of those things where it's like, you just, I don't know, probably if that was
an axe is an instant done.
Maybe if you can, swing it right with one hand,
Yeah, well, yeah, you probably need help, but I questioned, like, could you really do that? There's another scene I'm going to question the legitimacy of later on, but it's all in the name of over the top brutality.
You could probably do it in that scenario because you probably have so much adrenaline and be so horrified of what you're looking at that you'd probably just do it. I don't know.
So Eric and David are arguing over whether or not they should do this with Mia to save her soul. And Natalie comes walking in, one-armed, and shooting a nail gun at him. And I never realized a nail gun could be so brutal.
Yeah.
But she is going to town on these guys, and they are every blow looks so agonizingly painful.
Yeah, and he's just he's crying like stop, and he's like screaming when he's getting hit. And I actually love this scene because after she gets hit, like she shoots herself in the face like a few times, doesn't she? or is that Erica that does
No,
it? She gets it.
no,
Eric's the
yeah,
one that shoots her in the face, right?
yeah.
So she
She's
has all
about
these
to
like,
kill Eric, and
yeah,
David tackles her.
yeah,
So
and
she
then
kind of
he
disappears for a minute. Yeah,
and then she gets all of the nails in the face, and then when she comes back to the demon kind of leaves her body for a second just because it's messing with everyone, and then she starts to say, oh, my face hurts, why does my face hurt? That's I thought that was awesome because it's just constantly taunting all of them, like causing and inflicting all this physical pain on everyone, then just like leaving them.
yeah, yeah. She's
Yeah,
about to drive the final nail into Eric's head, and Eric's been brutalized to this point.
yeah,
As she's about to do it, David tackles her, knocks the nail gun out of her hand, and she disappears. Uh, so he's trying to, David's. They're all trying to pull their, they're trying to pull their nails out, and she shows back up with a crowbar and starts swinging. And Eric's shooting her in the face with the nail gun now, and that's when she gets hit. And he holds
yeah,
up his hand like to block her,
yeah,
and she hits him with the crowbar, and it just splits his hand.
yeah.
Just another
Yeah, and they show it like right down the middle of his hand, just like turns
just
into like two. Yeah,
yeah, it's so crazy. Um, and then she's about to smash his head in with the crowbar one more time. David blows off her other arm with the shotgun. Now she's
mm,
completely armless. Uh, she does return to herself, but then dies succumbing to her injuries. I guess the demon has no use for a no armed
yeah, and that's when she's asking
soul.
about her face and everything, and then
Yeah,
she just kind of dies right there. Yep.
yeah. Um, David takes Eric out to the Jeep and he says, "Okay, I'm going to do what I have to do with Mia," and he goes to the cellar to get her. While he's down there, Mia attacks him and is about to drown him. Eric attacks Mia and saves David. But in the scuffle, Eric, as we know, has been completely brutalized. He succumbs to his injuries and he dies there in the cellar. That's we think that's going to be the last of Eric. Um, then so David takes Mia to bury her alive. Right, he's got the instructions. Um, and while she's in the hole, she's talking like Mia, begging him to stop, complaining about, he left her when she was young, and their mother was, it's how she got addicted, and he already feels guilt from this, and she's
Mm,
playing on that, but he goes through with it. He buries her, and then he burns the grave, and then after a period of time he pulls her out, and he's set up to resuscitate her with a car battery and
right.
two syringes.
Well, I was wondering why when I watched the movie, I was like, why would you take 3 hours to do all this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're gonna have to like bury her and then get the dirt. Like, this is like just burn her alive. That's the fastest thing you can do. But then it comes to the resuscitation part, and I'm like, okay, I get it. He was trying to save her at the same time.
He didn't want
Yeah.
to just kill the demon. He
Right,
wanted to save
right.
his sister. But
Yeah.
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 Um, so he's trying to bring her back. It doesn't appear it's working. He starts to walk away, and she stands up, and she seems to be herself. She's talking normal. Um, they go back into the cabin. They're going to get the keys and they're going to leave. And of course, Eric is now a demon, and he attacks David, and he stabs David. Um, and the whole place is filled with gasoline because they were gonna burn her,
Yep.
until he decided to do this. So David gives Mia the keys and sends her out. And then he locks the door, so it's just him in there with Demon Eric, and he lights it up, and the gas can blows, and the whole cabin is ablaze. And he sacrificed himself with the hope that he saved his sister. So um, that should be the end of Eric, the end of David.
Yep.
People keep popping back up in this movie, so you never know when somebody's truly gone. So Mia's alone. She has the keys, and it starts raining blood. One of the final prophecy pages from the book. And when the blood rains, the demon emerges from the ground, and we see
Mhm.
the original demon woman from the start of the movie. She comes up through the ground. It's a cool scene. It's the cover. It's the cover of the Blu-ray.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool image. Um, but she chases Mia. They run into the shed, and she's stabbing and she's cutting, and she gets Mia multiple times, as if Mia's not been through enough.
Right.
Um,
She goes to the crawl space, right? Yeah.
Yeah. She cuts
Yeah.
through the crawl space and escapes out the side with a chainsaw. Very very Ash-like.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, cool. If you're an Evil Dead fan, you're waiting for where's the chainsaw.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. She hides under the Jeep, and in a really cool scene, you see the demon walking past the Jeep, and she takes the chainsaw out from under and just cuts her off at the legs,
Yeah.
which was really cool. But now you got the crawling demon chasing her, and Mia starts to slide out from under the Jeep, and the crawling demon pushes the Jeep over, and it lands on Mia's arm, and her arm is trapped, and the demon's crawling around at her. And this was the other part that I questioned. And if you can
I
convince
know.
me on
Yeah.
the first one, I don't think can be convinced on this one. It's a cool scene. It's a great practical effect, but
Yeah.
Mia literally tears her own arm off to get it out from under that Jeep. And I just don't know if that's doable.
I don't know. I mean, again, like, what about all those times you've heard about like a mother having to like lift a car because she had to save her baby? You know what I mean? I don't mean like lift it over her head, but like they lifted it just enough, or you know what I mean? Like this, like in those times of when you need to self-preserve, you kind of find that extra strength. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's possible. I don't know.
I would have bought into her having residual demon strength to lift the car off it more than I buy her just. I mean, you
Yeah.
see the skin rip and the muscle and
Yeah.
tear,
You see all the
like,
tissue just slowly ripping away, and it's
and she
vicious.
doesn't pass out. She just rips it out of there.
Right. Well,
And
it is funny because it's not like she's in a manic state. She actually takes the time to like have her cool dirty hairy line where she just looks at the demon. She's like, I've had enough of this shit. And
yeah,
she just like and then she like decides to do it. Yeah. Like it's
yeah.
not irrational. Like she makes the choice. Yeah.
Not only does she pull out, and I can't fathom what that. I mean, the pain would be ridiculous. She actually puts the chainsaw on her stump. Again, very, very
Very
Ash. Like,
Ash,
yeah,
the original. Right. Yeah.
you're not. I mean, that thing's. I love the movie. I question this part.
Yeah.
But
Well,
she
I mean,
takes the chainsaw.
it's a movie
and
about demons coming from a book. So
I know. She takes the chainsaw and saws the demon straight down the middle, blood spraying everywhere.
yeah.
End of the demon. She dissolves into the ground. The sun comes up, and Mia walks away.
Yep.
There's great sound. I noticed that the sound of the whole movie was fantastic. The
Yeah, it's
music was
brutal.
good. The noise of the forest, the noise of the presence in the forest, the
It's always
fire.
like rainy out. Yeah, it has this like rainy, dark feel to it. Yeah, this rainy, dark outside, slimy feel to the whole movie, and it was just I loved it.
Brutal movie, excellent movie. One of my favorite remakes. It did not win on the vote on Twitter as the top remake, but it's a great remake nonetheless. And if you follow through the credits, there's a post credit scene that is simply Bruce Campbell turning his head sideways in shadow and just saying groovy.
Yeah.
Of course, I was thrilled when I saw that.
Yeah, that's his cameo.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, God,
Perfect.
Bruce Campbell, love it. Cool movie, very, very violent, very, very brutal. The practical effects are outstanding, some of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, I love it. You can just tell they had fun with it. They just right from the opening scene, like we went over, they just get right into it. They do that first scene where it's vicious and just boom, Evil Dead. You get right into the movie. They don't waste time. The opening scene, it's just like they introduce the characters real quick and it just gets right into it.
One of the cool things about the opening scene is Mia's sitting on the car, and it's the car from the original, which actually was Sam Raimi's car. And
doesn't he put that in all his movies?
It made appearances in all of his movies. Yeah. I don't know if it still does, but up through the Spider-Man movies, it was the car that Uncle Henry drove when he delivered the with great comes great responsibility type speech. Was in that same car. But
that's awesome. That's awesome that he does that.
Yeah, and that car was in the Ash versus Evil Dead Stars series too. So whenever I see the car, it just makes me happy. But
Yeah.
Those are our remakes that do not suck. Neither one of these movies suck. These are fantastic movies, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Very different, very beautiful in different ways, beautiful violence. But a category I think we'll be back to. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. Yeah, we're gonna have to turn this into a series, Jerry. We're gonna have to revisit this multiple times.
Could be our end of year list for 2023.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to see.
All right. Well, that's our show for this week. Next week, we're getting into the holiday spirit with Christmas horror, which is going to be cool. As we started to research this, there's more options there than I thought, but it's going
Yeah.
to be a fun one
Yeah.
and be festive and all.
Agreed.
So, all right. Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening to the weekly Horrorscope. I'm Jerry. That's Matt, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
Your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.